Hey crew, it's Bit, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we are going to be getting back into First Kings because we left off in First Kings. But before we get into this, if you are new here, if you have no idea what is going on, I have unconventional views, I have an unconventional Bible study, and you should definitely start in Genesis. It is hard to keep up if you don't. With that being said, we are going to dive into First Kings 3 because we finished up at First Kings 2. This is starting off with Solomon as king, right? Last one, he became king through the means that he deemed necessary, and now he is king. So let's see what he does. And we are going to start off by stepping on toes. Later, Solomon formed an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, by marrying his daughter, and Solomon brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his palace and the house of the Lord, as well as the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing on the high places because a house for the name of the Lord had not yet been built. And Solomon loved the Lord and walked in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Now, the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for it was a great high place. And Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar there. We've seen that before in the high places, right? We've seen that before. And one night at Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream, and God said, "Ask, and I will give it to you." All right, here it is. This is the inflection point before and forward. This right here, in my estimation, is the inflection point. And let's look at this. As of now, this is exactly the third king legally. Well, if you count Absalom, it's the fourth king, but regardless, it's in the first five, right? And so we have the tabernacle, which is where the Ark of the Covenant is to be housed. And the proper place, according to the covenant by which they are holding, right, for all sacrifice to be made is there at the tabernacle by the priest according to the statutes with zero exceptions. You can kill your own animal wherever, but it cannot be a sacrifice. We have seen that. And we're going to take a brief trip through history real quick. Are y'all ready? It hasn't been that long ago that we were in Deuteronomy. And we're going to read through this again. This is Deuteronomy 17. When you enter the land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you have taken possession of it and settled in it, and you say, let us set a king over us like all the nations around us. So God knew in Deuteronomy that this was going to happen. We've covered that as we've gone through the kings, right? You are to appoint over yourselves the king whom the Lord your God shall choose. Okay, Saul, yes. Okay, David, yes. Right? Those two have been appointed by God. The other one, at least, and two, no. There was no appointing by God unless it was a false appointing, right? Absalom, was he appointed by God when he assumed the kingship? Like, I'm trying not to even include him in this conversation, right? We're talking Saul, we're talking David, we're talking Solomon. That's three in line. Saul was the only one out of the three who was somewhat holy. According to the statutes, according to what is supposed to happen, Saul tried his best to walk according to the commandments of God. And he's the only one that did. David absolutely did not. And if you need a refresher on that, go check out Samuel. It will let you know. 2 Samuel specifically, like the whole section, will let you know that David was not a good dude. And so, what statutes are you walking in? Because he says flat out that I, David, have chosen Solomon, right? That's what he says. That's what we just went over. Appoint a king from among your brothers. You are not to set over yourselves a foreigner who is not one of your brothers. Well, guess what? Where's Bathsheba from? She is not from Israel. She was the wife of the Hittite, but he had gotten her from afar. And she was not Israeli. And the passage of the lineage is through the matriarchal line. The same as if you go back, 5 generations of David? They went to Gaza and got an influx of some blood. And then, like David, when he was supporting the Philistines, when David was killing Israel in the name of the Philistines, like he was just returning half home, right? He resembled those people. Solomon is different too, right? Solomon was the 10th in line. And he was chosen by David on his deathbed. But the king must not acquire many horses for himself, or send the people back to Egypt to acquire more horses. For the Lord has said, you are never to go back that way again. He must not take many wives for himself, lest his heart go astray. And he must not accumulate for himself large amounts of silver and gold. Keep in mind this as we go forward. And when he is seated on his royal throne, he must write for himself a copy of this instruction on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priests. It is to remain with him, and he is to read from it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to fear the Lord his God by carefully observing all the words in this instruction and these statutes. Then his heart will not be exalted above his countrymen, and he will not turn aside from the commandment to the right or the left, in order that he and his sons may reign many years over his kingdom in Israel. Now, I want you, we've come a good distance since we were in Deuteronomy in this study, and I want you to look back through the Judges, right, and then into the first king, right? The first king was Saul, and he was anointed by God. Samuel chose him out because of the instruction of God. You can say the same for David, according to the records, right? Did they do this? Either one of them? No. Now, Saul was the closest. I've gone over that in Samuel. I'm not going to rehash it, but Saul was the closest. David was not even close, right? David was like way out of the ballpark. The many wives for himself, the large amounts of silver and gold. And then Solomon, what does Solomon do? Solomon compounds the situation, because he doesn't just go back for horses. He goes back and gets his whole wife from there. And the line of Israel is passed through the woman. The property is passed through the man, but the line is passed through the woman. All right, back to Kings. We're going to talk about it, but we're not going to go back and pull up the scriptures, right? But this sacrifice on the high places, what are you even talking about? Bruh. Like, there are so many examples of this in particular being a bad thing. But we do have evidence that if you make these specific numbers, right? If you shed a specific amount of blood in a very specific way, in the right place, you get to the talk to the right entity. Now, whether or not that entity is serving good or evil, it's not up to me. But chances are, if your sacrifice involves a lot of blood, you're on the wrong tip. Now, what was God's commandment to the kings, right? Do not accumulate all the silver and gold. Now, you can make the argument that he spent a lot of money on the temple. And we will get to that, probably not today, but we will definitely get to that. But he did accumulate for himself considerable wealth. And how? How did he do that, you might ask? Well, it turns out, I don't know if we get to it today or not, but it is definitely coming. Solomon is an arms dealer. Solomon gets chariots from Egypt at a discount, and he ships them to Lebanon along with horses. Did you know that? Solomon made his money in arms dealing. He sells chariots and horses. That's how Solomon makes his money for the temple of the Lord, where there shall be no engraven image. Keep that in mind too. You shall not have an engraven image. Keep that in mind as we get into the temple of Solomon. And so he goes to this high place, not to the tabernacle, but to this high place. And maybe, I will grant that maybe the tabernacle has been moved here, right? It was the great high place, so okay. He went to the tabernacle. It's not specified, and it absolutely should be. It absolutely should be that the man of God went to the place of God and made a sacrifice there, but it's not. He went to a high place, and the reason I make that distinction is because of what it says down here, right? The people were still sacrificing at the high place because the house has not been built, and that's not true. We had the tabernacle, that is where he is housed with the ark. But Solomon himself there it is. And Solomon loved the Lord and walked in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense on the high places. Except that he burned incense and sacrificed on the high places. That's the exception from the statutes. But then you can really make the argument that he's not walking in the commandments of God. He's walking in the statutes of David, because David did not walk in the commandments of God. Like at all. As if they did not exist. And then the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, and it was a great high place. And he offered 1,000 burnt offerings. And then he got what he wanted. The entity appears to Solomon in a dream. Now, I hold unconventional beliefs, and this is where I lose a lot of people. And what I'm here for is not everybody, right? I don't believe that God himself directs these things. I believe that there are entities, and some of them are acting in accordance with God's will, and some of them are acting not in accordance with God's will. But I don't believe that any of these entities are God, the Creator, in himself, right? He is at best communicating with these. Right? God is beyond the scope of our understanding to a degree that you can't even understand. It's as if we're trying to imagine him as us in any slightest way, and that's not right. Because while we are products of him, he is not limited in scope to ourselves. God is all things, and by that I mean he is literally these glasses too. He's the glass that makes it up. He's the plastic in the frames. He's the metal in the frames. And to limit these glasses to the scope of a human is absolutely ridiculous. Or to grant it the powers of a human, because they don't see. They help me to see better. That would be limiting, right? But God is these glasses. He's not limited to these glasses. God is us. We are not God. Right? I always want to make that extremely abundantly clear. I don't believe we are God. I believe we are divine sparks. That God has placed divinity in us. Our souls itself is a divine gift from God to experience this world. And we can't limit him in the way that we think of ourselves. It is not a him. Like I say him because that is how it's easy to conceptualize, but it is beyond humanity in a way that is unimaginable. Like, you can try to comprehend it. I can try to comprehend it, and I'm not a dumb fellow. And it's still beyond my scope, right? Even when I think, yeah, that's kind of close, it's not. Because there is so much more that can be there. Because he's not just me in these glasses, but he's me in these glasses in this rock. And he's me in these glasses in that wall. And he's me in these glasses in this rock and that wall and my dog. He is all of these things at the same time, enacting everything. And so he doesn't take direct action in this manner. There's too much going on. And not that he can, but that for him to do that would be to be interfering in the free will. And that's a whole deeper thing. But all of that to say that there are entities. I really do believe that. I believe that there are entities who are working towards the highest creation and those who are not. They are working towards destruction. There are entities who are obsessed with lust and greed and pride, right? All of these things are represented, like our terminology is a representative of the entities. And these entities act in their own interest. Whether or not they are the personifications of sin, that doesn't matter. But say that they have 2 or 3 of these attributes, right? Like, and maybe they possess good ones too, but like, it's said that Lucifer is beautiful, but he is prideful, right? Well, he was smart. He had good qualities, but that doesn't make him good. It doesn't make him God, and it doesn't make him equal to God, despite what he might think. I think, in all seriousness, that every time there is a blood sacrifice required for anything to happen, then you are dealing with the wrong entity. Now, there is only one possible exception to that, and we will get to that in the New Testament. But it's not going to go the way a lot of people would like it to go. Because I believe quite firmly that Jesus had a purpose and a mission, and that all the prophecies were fulfilled, but it was not for your salvation, but rather so that it would put an end to all of this death and bloodshed and sacrifice. That instead of thinking that you are required to have this cow die, he said, no, I'm going to say that I died so that you don't keep killing cows for no reason. And that's an oversimplification of my belief, but that is generally where it's at. I earnestly and in every step am seeking only to serve the God of creation in whatever manner he gives to me, whether I want to or not, because I tried really hard, y'all know that. I tried really hard to stop this and not do this, but when I stopped doing what I am doing here, when I stopped talking about the problems in this book, the fruit of the Spirit withered. And when I picked it back up, the fruit of the Spirit grew. And I can't make a more definite thing. Like, I can't tell you the specifics of it because that's between me and God. I can tell you quite firmly that it is true. That when I started talking about this entity issue and this blood sacrifice issue, that's when God chose to bless me. In the ways that aren't obvious, right? Not in monetary wealth, but in the fruit of the Spirit. The things that I know are the most important are the things that are being done in his name in my life for what I am doing. And that's why I'm here talking about these entities in such a long fashion right now. Because going forward, we will be dealing with a lot of entities, and some of them are aligned correctly. And that makes it difficult, right? So far, we haven't really seen a whole lot of that. We saw it with Abraham. If you go all the way back to the initial sacrifice, right? He ties his son down because an entity told him to do it. And then another entity comes and tells him to stop and to use this ram instead. That's there. We've talked about that. We have seen several times an entity standing in the way of what another entity has said. We have seen that, right? Going forward, there is not as much direct opposition going to be as visible. But some of these entities are quite terrible, and some of them are not. And the way that God has shown me to discern is whether or not there is blood involved in the sacrifice. Because if there is, with that one possible exception, that when we get to the New Testament, we're going to look at it with new eyes, right? We're looking at all of this with new eyes as we go along. And with that one possible exception, every single time that we have seen a blood sacrifice so far, it has led to some pretty terrible stuff. It really has. Like, down to the fact that Abraham decided that all of this land that was not his was going to be his. And that is the justification for 28 million to go away. Man, woman, child, and livestock. Out in the fields hunting them down. That was real. And so it's important to pound this entity issue right now. Because going forward, a lot is going to depend upon discernment. And I can't discern for you. I'm trying to show you how I have discerned. I am trying to be as open and honest. And honestly, most of what I do here is like I'm just letting it flow through me. As I read through whatever strikes me that he wants me to say, I just let it go. I don't even remember a lot of it sometimes. I have to go back and watch it because it's just coming out the way it needs to come out. And you can take that and run and call me satanic if you want, but I promise you, I do not serve destruction. I serve the creator of the universe, he who holds all things. And if I don't, then he knows how to correct me. He has done it. And I will recognize it, and I submit to his will, and I surrender to God himself. In all things that I do, I have been seeking nothing but his face throughout all of this. And now we're going to get back into the text. And so he goes up and he offers 1,000 burnt offerings in this high place. And the Lord appears to Solomon in a dream. And he says, you have shown much loving devotion to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness, righteousness, and uprightness of heart. No, not really. Not really at all. Like we have not seen that. Like we have seen him be obedient to go out and kill people. And that is the extent of his obedience. If he gets to wade through blood, he's down. But if he's got to listen to somebody or control his emotions or his penance, then he doesn't do that. He is covetous. He is an adulterer. He is just not a good man. He makes sacrifices in the wrong places. He is a bandit. He has stolen from people. You have maintained this love and devotion by giving him a son to sit on this throne the very day. And again, God said that the progression should be firstborn, and if the firstborn dies, it goes to the second. It does not jump to the 10th by willful decree of one man. David never seeked God's face to find out where to pass the kingship. He overlooked God's face to give the kingship to Solomon. Give the kingship. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in my father David's place. But I am only a little child, not knowing how to go out or come in. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a people too numerous to count or number. I don't know, David kind of numbered them, didn't he? Therefore, give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people and discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? Now, it pleased the Lord that Solomon had made this request. So God said to him, since you have asked for this, instead of requesting a long life or wealth for yourself or death for your enemies, but you have asked for discernment to administer justice, behold, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has never been, nor will ever be, another like you. Did the Lord just prophesy that there would never be another man as wise as Solomon? Okay. What about Jesus? Was Jesus as wise as Solomon? Ooh, somebody just got their feelings hurt. I'm not here to hurt feelings. I'm here to point out truths. And sometimes those truths are going to hurt feelings. If there's never going to be another man as wise and discerning as Solomon, then what was the Son of Man? Or the Son of God? Moreover, I will give you what you did not request, both riches and honor, so that during all your days no man in any kingdom will be your equal. So, if you walk in my ways and keep my statutes and commandments, just as your father David did, I will prolong your days. I'm not going to hammer it again. We have hammered it enough, right, in Samuel. David would not. And then Solomon awoke, and indeed it had been a dream. So he returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. And then he held a feast for all of his servants. So he goes to the high place and makes a sacrifice of 1,000. And we were like, well, maybe the ark was up there with the tabernacle. Guess what? It's not. So he went to an unauthorized place and made an unauthorized sacrifice, and God answered it. No, an entity answered it. And that entity gave him what he asked for. Wealth. He says he wants wisdom and discernment. And all right, I pray for that every single day. I have been praying for that, not realizing. Like sometimes you pray for things and you expect it to come to you in a certain way. And then sometimes you pray for things and it comes to you in a different way, right? I've been asking for wisdom and discernment, and then I started reading a book. I started reading a book out loud and talking about the things in the book out loud in the manner of the way that God wants me to do it. And I've acquired a little bit of discernment. We're about to step on a whole lot of toes next. So if you have already had your feelings hurt, you might get your feelings hurt as we wrap this up. Just fair warning. Solomon judges wisely. This is the wisest man ever to walk the earth, before or since. The wisest man. Like the best decision possible. And at that time, 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. And one woman said, "Please, my lord, this woman and I live in the same house, and I gave birth while she was in the house. And on the 3rd day after I gave birth, this woman also had a baby. We were alone, with no one in the house but the 2 of us. And during the night, this woman's son died because she rolled over on him. And so she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I was asleep. And she laid him in her bosom and put her dead son at my bosom. And the next morning when I got up to nurse my son, I discovered he was dead. But when I examined him, I realized that he was not the son I had born." "No," said the other woman, "the living one is my son and the dead one is your son." But the first woman insisted, "No, the dead one is yours and the living one is mine." So they argued before the king. And then the king replied, "This woman says, my son is alive and yours is dead. But this woman says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive." And so the king continues, "Bring me a sword." So they brought him a sword, and the king declared, "Cut the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other." And then the woman whose son was alive spoke to the king, because she yearned with compassion for her son. "Please, my lord," she said, "give her the living baby. Do not kill him." But the other woman said, "He will be neither mine nor yours. Cut him in 2. And then the king gave his ruling. "Give the living baby to the first woman. By no means should you kill him. She is his mother." And when all Israel heard the judgment the king had given, they stood in awe of him, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice. look after the widow and the orphan child. I'm going to offer an alternative. And people will get mad about it, but it's whatever. I'm not trying to rewrite anything. I'm just saying. If the wisest man on earth's solution to this problem is to cut the child in two, and I get the logic there. I've grown up with the logic there. That the woman who wants the baby to flourish and thrive, that's the woman who's actually, that's her baby, and that's how he makes the decision. By being callous and using the sword, then it sparked that. I just don't know. I'm going to say that maybe you could achieve the same ends with the same results by taking the child from both of the women and saying, okay, well, this child now is going to be a ward of the state because I am commanded by God to take care of the children. And so since y'all don't have a husband to take care of you, I am going to take this child in. This man of God who has all of this surplus funds suddenly springing up, because that happens really quickly, right? And one of these women is going to be happy with that decision because that would be the better decision for her child, and the other one will not because she just wants possession of the child. I think that the same ends may have been achieved, and I mean, maybe not, right? That's not me doubting God as much as it is me doubting Solomon, because I don't know that Jesus, in his wisdom, would have said the same thing. I don't know that Jesus would have said, cut this child in two. I think that Jesus, in his wisdom, would have found a different way to do it. And that's not to say that Jesus was God or divine. I'm just saying that Jesus was a wise man. Absolutely. He followed God to the best of his ability. Absolutely. And so I place a lot of value there. I really do. I think that by saying that no man will ever be as wise as Solomon, it is setting the bar at a mid-range level. Because Solomon was intelligent. I will grant you intelligence, but I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure that this light is the same as, like, if you don't look at it as though bloodshed is okay, then it's a problem, right? And his solution, his wisdom stems from the blood. And that's a problem. And maybe I'm not qualified to talk about it. Maybe I'm not. But I just think that there was a better solution than that. I could be wrong. I know. And it's not one of those major issues like we normally talk about, right? This is just me spitballing some things, right? This is not the whole of the story rests upon it like it does with whether or not you're holding to the commandments, whether or not you are doing what God has commanded you to do. There is a gap in time, and I understand. I know some people are really probably fuming because of this, but they discover some writings and they start to live by them later. But where have they been? I think that when they discover these writings in a little while, that's when they made these writings, and when it was set, right? When the history was finally set, was right then. We're not there yet, but we're at that inflection point where the history has been, and this is what the history shall be. We can probably get through. Yeah, let's go ahead and run through 4 because there's a lot of reading in this one. But so King Solomon ruled over Israel, and these were his chief officials. Azariah, son of Zadok, was the priest. Ahilareph and Ahijah were the sons of Shisha, were secretaries. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the recorder. Benaniah, son of Jehoiada, was in charge of the army. Zadok and Abiathar were the priests, and Azariah, son of Nathan, was charge of the governors. Zabdud, son of Nathan, was a priest and advisor to the king. Abishar was in charge of the palace, and Adoniram, son of Abda, was in charge of the slaves. Let's not call it forced labor. Let's not. Let's call it what it is. Forced labor is slavery. So Adoniram, son of Abda, was in charge of the slaves. And if you look through these names, you might recognize some of the names that made sure that Solomon was king. It's funny how their children wound up in positions of power for the arms dealer. Some things never change. And Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel to provide food for the king and his household. Each one would arrange provisions for 1 month of the year, and these were their names. Ben-Hur, in the hill country of Ephraim. Ben-Deker, in Makaz, in Shabalim, in Beth-Shemesh, and in Elon Beth-Hanan. Ben-Hesed, in Arabath. Soko and all the lands of Hefer belonged to him. Ben-Abinadab, in Napthor. Taptha, a daughter of Solomon, was his wife. Bana, son of Ahulud, in Tanakh, in Megiddo, and in all of Beth-Shean, next to Zereth, below Jezreel, from Beth-Shean to Abel-Meholah, and on past Jokmeam. Ben-Geber, in Ramoth-Gilead. The villages of Jair, son of Manasseh, in Gilead belonged to him, as well as the region of Argob and Bashan, with its 60 great cities with walls and bronze bars. Ahinadab, son of Iddo, in Manaheim. Ahimaaz in Naphtali, he married Basemath, a daughter of Solomon. Banah, son of Hushai, in Asher and in Elath. Jehoshaphat, son of Peru, in Issachar. Shimei, son of Elah, in Benjamin. And Geber, son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, including the territories of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan. There was also one governor in the land of Judah. And the people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sands on the seashore, and they were eating and drinking and rejoicing. And Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. These kingdoms offered tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. And Solomon's provisions for a single day were 30 cores of fine flour, and that's going to be 5.5 tons. So, for a single day, 5.5 tons of flour. And so that's going to be 11 tons of meal, 10 fat oxen, 20 range oxen, 100 sheep, as well as deer, gazelles, roebuck, and fattened poultry. For Solomon had dominion over everything west of the Euphrates, over all the kingdoms, from Tiphsah to Gaza, and he had peace on all sides. Throughout the days of Solomon, Judah and Israel dwelt securely from Dan to Beersheba, each man under his own vine and his own fig tree. Solomon had 4,000 stalls for his chariot horses and 12,000 horses. And each month the governors in turn provided food for King Solomon and all who came to his table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. Each one also brought to the required place their quotas of barley and straw for the chariot horses and other horses. And God gave Solomon wisdom, exceedingly deep insight, and understanding beyond measure. Like the sand on the seashore, Solomon's wisdom was greater than that of all the men of the East, greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than all men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and wiser than Heman, Chalcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame spread throughout the surrounding nations. Solomon composed 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop growing in the wall, and he taught about animals, birds, and reptiles, and fish. And so all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the earth who heard of his wisdom. So Solomon was a nerd, right? Solomon liked to learn about things. That's cool. And maybe he did have an uncanny knack of understanding. God has blessed many people with that, right? Maybe he was blessed above all men, but if so, that does contradict what's coming in the New Testament. Right? If he is the wisest of men, then the man who was, even if you consider him divine, right? If he was fully man and fully God, or half man and half God, or however you want to look at it, if he was wiser than Solomon, then God's word was broken when he called Solomon wiser than all men. It's a contradiction. It's not the biggest one. It's not even the most important one. But it is one. It's a prophecy that's overlooked. There will never be another man as wise as Solomon. That's a prophecy. We'll go ahead and do 5-2, and then we'll wrap it up. Let me check time before I say that, because, yeah, we got just enough time. Let's go ahead and do it. All right, so now, when Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon had been anointed king in his father's place, he sent envoys to Solomon, for Hiram had always been a friend of David. And Solomon relayed this message to Hiram. As you are well aware, due to all the wars waged on all sides against my father David, he could not build a house as the name of the Lord, for the name of the Lord his God, until the Lord had put his enemies under his feet. But now, the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or crisis. So behold, I plan to build a house for the name of the Lord my God, according to what the Lord said to my father David. I will put your son on your throne in your place, and he will build the house for my name. Now, therefore, order that the cedars of Lebanon be cut down for me. My servants will be with your servants, and I will pay your servants whatever wages you set. For you know that there are none among us as skilled in logging as the Sidonians. Now, these were giant trees, right? Like sequoia. And when Hiram received Solomon's message, he rejoiced greatly and said, Blessed be the Lord this day. He has given David a wise son over this great people. Then Hiram sent a reply to Solomon saying, I have received your message. I will do all you desire regarding the cedar and cypress timber. My servants will haul the logs from Lebanon to the sea, and I will float them as rafts by the sea to the place you specify. And there I will separate the logs, and you can take them away. And in exchange, you can meet my needs by providing my household with food. So Hiram provided Solomon with all the cedar and cypress timbers he wanted. And year after year, Solomon would provide Hiram with 20,000 cores of wheat, which is going to be 3,800 tons, 3,800 tons of wheat as food for his household, as well as 20,000 baths of pure olive oil, and that is going to be 116,000 gallons. That's a lot of wood and trees being exchanged, right? That's not cheap. And the Lord gave Solomon wisdom as he had promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. And then King Solomon conscripted a labor force of 30,000 men from all of Israel, and he sent them to Lebanon in monthly shifts of 10,000 men, so that they would spend 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. And Adoniram was in charge of the slavery. And Solomon had 70,000 porters and 80,000 stonecutters in the mountains, not including his 3,300 foremen who supervised the workers. Some manuscripts say 3,600. And the king commanded them to quarry large, costly stones and lay the foundation of the temple with dressed stones. And so Solomon and Hiram's builders, along with the Gebalites, quarried the stone and prepared the timber and stone for the construction of the temple. I'm not going to go back, as I have done so many times, and talk about cutting stone for the worship of God, right? When he told you to build an altar, it's of uncut stones, touched by no hand of man, so that you would not think that the works of man was what you was worshiping. But, I mean, why would you hold to things that were written down? Why would you even do that? That doesn't even make sense. I know I hold some unconventional beliefs. I know that I have a tendency to step on toes, and it is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. I am merely reading this in the manner that it was been given to me to read it. And I tried to not do this for a while, and I didn't. Like I told y'all already, like I received the opposite of the fruits of the Spirit. My fruits of the Spirit withered and was dying. And when I decided to surrender and do this is when I started receiving his blessings. And not the blessings of the world, but the blessings of the Spirit. And so I know I'm on the right track with this, so I can't apologize for how I do it. This is how he made me to do it. And most of the time when I'm saying things, it is just something that he's put there, right? The consistency is a problem. Like what we talked about today, other than the sacrifice in the wrong place, like that right there is not walking in the commandments of the Lord. And then he says, as long as you do it. Well, he didn't do it already, right there, already done. He didn't do it. He sacrificed in the wrong places, and God did not correct him. Because then he went back to the altar and made sacrifices. He's making sacrifices in two places. There's only one place. Maybe the temple's not built, but the tabernacle is a thing. The responsibilities of the Levites is a thing. If there were 1,000 animals to be sacrificed, the priests should have got their cut. At a minimum, they should have got their tithe out of it. And so it's not done correctly. And God doesn't dress him down in his vision. God blesses him for doing it incorrectly. The same as he did for David. The same as he did for all of the patriarchs. And so it is a consistency. Sacrifice blood, get blessed. Seek the face of the Lord and don't get blessed. Hold the commandments, don't get blessed. Try to do the right thing, get your kinghood stripped away. Kill men for their wives. Become king. We're not even going to get into the Jonathan relationship. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion, because this is a complicated topic, and it is going to get way more complicated from here, right? All of this before, like this really is the inflection point. We're going to start seeing prophecies. We're going to start seeing entities appearing that some of them are actually aligned good. So most of these prophecies they don't come after sacrifice of blood. It's amazing. Some of these things don't have to have a sacrifice for it. In the Old Testament, it's amazing how it works. And so as we go through those, we will talk about them. And we really have to be discerning. And I know that some people are out there just screaming at me that I am not discerning. I promise you I spend more time on this than you would really believe. Even when I'm engaged in other things, this is my topic for my entire life. And I'm merely trying to do what is right. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you, and you are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. But until next time, this has been Pit's Take. Peace.